All right, welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am Una.
And I am Crypto 1, or Crypto 2, or Crypto 3.
Oh, or what about 4?
No!
We got 4 as a new number.
Oh yeah, that's our new number we can talk about. But it's drawing of 3.
All right, we'll get there. We're going to talk about that. We're doing a 5-part, see what I did there? 3, 4, 5.
Oh.
A 5-part session on the drawing of 3. If you didn't check out the Gunslinger, we are going through the entire Dark Tower series, breaking this down, and it's going to be a little bit more of a literary breakdown rather than just a straight reactionary videos. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as we do tons of Stephen King content as well as other literary breakdowns.
So not only do we reference him every video, we now finally are doing another Stephen King book. Our favorite author, we're back.
Now this is only my second reading. This is my second time through this time. This is your...
I believe it's my third, but I'm doing audio again, so I've read the book twice, and I'm listening to it now for the third time.
Okay, no spoilers at this section. We're going up through Chapter 3 of The Prisoner. But I will say we've gotten a lot better at this video thing. Like, looking back at our first Gunslinger video, which is our first video ever on this channel, it's kind of probably like what Stephen King was like looking back on his Gunslinger, where he's like, oh, got a little bit better there.
Yeah, so the Dark Tower series, huge series, very popular, his probably best work ever, and that first book is a hard sell to get your average person into the series. But once you get past it, kind of my initial reaction here is... this is arguably the second or third best book in the entire series.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will agree with you there. And if you're new to the channel, we do a kind of an initial reaction, quotes, which are all spoiler-free. And then once we head into the plot and then the discussion, that's when you're going to hit spoiler territory. So in terms of reaction, Mr. Crypto, it's 1987 when this came out. And Mr. Stephen King did not come off drugs until 1995.
That will probably affect his writing.
Do you remember if you knew that when you first read this story?
Oh, no. I was a teenager in the 90s. Definitely did not know his personal backstory, which I think is important because that changes your perspective on why he is writing this way and why certain things are so important in the story, I think, as he's personally getting rid of some of his own demons.
Because so much of what a person chooses to write about is going to be from their experiences in their wheelhouse, if you will.
And how they write it. Because I know a lot of people, they get very negative about how these things are written. But I think that if you can understand a person's perspective, you can maybe get past some of your own insecurities or problems about that writing style and then actually enjoy the book.
So let's compare this to Gunslinger real quick.
Okay.
We've got a faster pace. I know people love talking about pace and like, what are the things people always say? Pace, well done, characters fleshed out. Like, we got to do the pop hits here. The pacing of the story picks up. You start to feel the weight of the tower in this one. And you get a lot more perspectives because it's not just Roland who's kind of like the narrator in this, right?
Yeah. Well, my big takeaway for comparing the two is that the first one, it's all about him getting to the Man in Black, and you think it's more maybe a revenge story, or he's kind of mentioned that he needs to get to this guy for the Dark Tower, but that almost seems like secondary to just got to get the Man in Black, got to get the Man in Black, got to get the Man in Black. Where this one, not only do you start to see more of the story, obviously, as it unfolds, but you realize that was the prologue. I mean, that was like the longest prologue ever. That the main heart of the story is him getting to this Dark Tower.
All right, let's jump into quotes real quick. I've got one quote for you.
Let's do it.
Because a man who dealt in drugs would either know a man or be a man who also cured the sick. I think that's interesting, knowing some of Stephen King's background in this piece, right?
Yeah, so like, how did he get clean? That probably is something we should know.
In 95, yeah, I have started his on writing, but I never finished it. I would like to go back at some point in my life and check that out.
Or more importantly, why he got clean. Is that where he almost died?
The car crash was 1999, I believe, which would have been 4 years after he became sober.
So those probably are not very well linked. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to do some digging in on that as we go through this.
How old is his son?
Oh, that was like 1970. Yeah, that was way before.
Okay, so that doesn't matter either. Dang. Some Stephen King expert needs to put in the comments below, please, why he stops doing drugs. But drugs are bad, kids, so it's a good thing.
All right, let's jump into plot, and then we'll hit discussion, because already I feel the need to start talking about this.
Okay, let's do it.
So 7 hours after talking with the man in black, Roland wakes up on the beach and finds himself being attacked by giant lobsters. He loses 2 fingers and a toe in the battle, and now struggles when using his right hand in the gun. He travels north and stumbles upon a door on the beach that can only be viewed from one side, and when he opens the door, he enters a different world and time. He enters the prisoner's door and finds himself in Eddie Dean, a heroin junkie running cocaine on a plane's perspective. Now, from Eddie's perspective, he suddenly finds himself speaking another language in his sleep. His eye color is changing, and a voice in his head. The flight attendants take notice of Eddie's strange actions and notify the flight crew. At the same time, Roland notices that the flight crew's onto him and pulls Eddie into his world after he learns that he can pull things through to help him remove the cocaine that he's running off of his body before he is busted. He had Eddie run into the bathroom right before that, and the flight crew's trying to break in the door to catch Eddie with his drugs. Eddie quickly jumps back through the door, the crew breaks in, and Eddie's sitting there with his trousers dropped. All right, and that is the plot, so let's jump into discussion, because I know I'm craving this. We started talking about the gunslinger. We got to talk about this. Could you skip the gunslinger and just start with the drawing of 3 because the gunslinger is so divisive?
Yes. I think there's an argument for both. I really do. I think that you need some of it, but do you need all that to understand really what's going on? Not really. Not from a story perspective, no.
It's kind of like the Phantom Menace. The first time someone told me that you didn't actually need the Phantom Menace in Star Wars, I was like, what? Yeah, you do. And then, I tried watching it just 2 through 6, and I was like, oh my God, Phantom Menace is totally irrelevant to the rest of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's like those stories where if you pull out the hero, everything still happens exactly the same. You could almost say that about the gunslinger, that story doesn't really matter. But we can't talk too much about it, spoilers, because we've read more of the series than maybe somebody watching the video. And it does matter in some regards, especially to a couple of key characters.
Well, I'll say this. I thought it was kind of cool when we were reading The Gunslinger, and you pointed out that when he was, so we're assuming you've read The Gunslinger at this point, that when he's twirling the bullet, I think it was, during the Oracle scene, I believe, during the hypnosis.
Yeah, he's hypnotizing Jake.
And he says that he's twirling the bullet with his fingers that weren't long for this world or something along those lines. And you asked me if I remembered what happened to his fingers, and I had forgotten about this. Kind of an interesting call forward. Now, with that said, I think the recap that they do at the beginning of this book, and maybe some more explanation into the tarot cards, I think is enough that you could actually just start with a drawing of 3 and have a better recap, smaller flashbacks in future books, and have cut out Gunslinger completely as well.
Yeah, I think that, and that's the point that we can go towards next, that is really the driving plot, or the driving mechanism for the plot, is the tarot cards. So if you just had that information, and then, yeah, as you said, a few other little flashbacks, you could definitely cut the book out. But the tarot cards are so vitally important to understand what's going on,
right,
and to see some of the foreshadowing that's going to take place later.
So the first one was the Hangman, which represents strength, a.k.a. Roland. The second one was the Sailor, who drowns, a.k.a. Jake, both from the previous book, if you will. Then you've got the Prisoner, which is explained in this section, which has a baboon strangling is on the back of someone and strangling them. Which, if you didn't know, do you know what a monkey on my back slang term is?
So that's being addicted to something or drugs.
You can't get rid of it. It's an addiction. So a little on the nose there with, hey, this guy's going to be addicted to something.
Why do you think the picture's a baboon though, and not a monkey?
Is it so on the nose to say there was a monkey on his back, as opposed to making a baboon, making it a little bit different?
Well, we were in Roland's world, so that makes sense. They would be a different animal.
Now, the next four cards haven't really been revealed yet, but we have the Lady of Shadows, which was described as two-faced, 2 faces on one person.
So good.
We've got the Gritting Reaper, which is death, but not for Roland. We've got the Tower, which was placed on top of Roland. And we've got a sun rising over cupids and sprites, which could be roses or blood, and it's life, but not for Roland, which we have yet to learn. But if you were paying attention, you would have been like, oh, okay, the prisoner was the third card with the monkey on the back, an addiction, and Eddie's a heavy drug user, right? You'd assume that these next 4 cards may or may not be important for the rest of the plot, right?
Yeah. You would think so.
So here's an interesting thing about the prisoner card is the person who gave Eddie the drugs was William Wilson. Do you know who that is?
That is a famous individual from another of our favorite authors, Mr. Poe.
And that story is very famous because it's kind of like the Fight Club plot. Like, people are like, Fight Club's so original. I'm like, it's William Wilson. Like,
it's totally stolen.
But it's semi-autobiographical. And we know that this wasn't a coincidence because, one, he calls it out that it is from Poe in this story. But even then, I have a quote where when he was writing The Outsider, with there's kind of like a parallel between like this character Anderson in that he is directly making a reference in that as well. So we know Stephen King's a fan of this as well. So this story is very famous for being semi-autobiographical. It's interesting that he places it on the character that is doing drugs in this plot, and he was heavily on drugs during this time too.
You can totally tell that, as you said before, like, hey, do you know which character he put, in the story that's himself, like we've seen with others? King is obviously Eddie Dean.
It's interesting too because the William Wilson plot is like, is this other character that's just like me, or am I insane type of thing? So is he Eddie Dean, or is he a copy of Eddie Dean, and he's looking at Eddie Dean? I think there's an interesting line in here where this is a quote from the book. Eddie knew well enough what lines like that meant. They mean blood poisoning. They meant the devil was doing more than breathing up your ass. He was already crawling up the sewers that led to your pump. So here, he's painting drugs as bad. Like he's on drugs, but you can be addicted and on something and still admit, this is poisoning for my body. This is not good. I wish I wasn't doing this. So I think it's interesting to have a semi-autobiographical reference and him painting this drug-addicted person and painting the drugs as bad from the narrator Roland's perspective, where he's like, hey, you got to get off that. That's gonna kill your pump, man. Like, you're gonna get taken out by that. Kind of talking to that monkey on his back, if you will, right?
Yeah. And side note, Eddie is absolutely hilarious. King wrote him so well. I crack up laughing all the time, and I'm listening to the book in the car, and my wife will sometimes look at me because she's listening to something else, and I just start cracking up laughing at some of the things he says. They're so funny. He writes them very witty. So
I like Tudorfish. Tudorfish is my favorite.
Yeah, Eddie's just written very well. I enjoy his character. He's my second favorite character.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like Eddie, and I know who your favorite character is, and I think a lot of people like that person too. We won't go into spoilers, we promise.
Yeah.
All right, another key point, if you didn't check out the Gunslinger talk, let me throw a throwback here, that the number 3 is used all over that book. Every chapter has like 10 to 20 references of the number 3.
Now we're changing it. What's our new number, Una?
Well, we have a lot of 3s, but we got a lot of 4s now as well. And I think you said you don't remember. I can't for the life of me remember why he puts 4 all over the place in this book. But you've got the 4, the lobster comes out 4 meters away. The lobster's 4 feet long. He walks then 3 to 4 miles till he finds the door. When they make the Charlie Brown Lucy reference, she pulls the football away from him 3 to 4 times. Jane, when she talks about the colored contacts, only other knew 4 people that had colored contacts. He sat in seat 3A.
And I think that was interesting as well. I like that 3, drawing of 3. I also like that A is the first letter of the alphabet, and Eddie's the first one being drawn. I think that King is a smart enough writer to throw out little things like that, Easter eggs for people that want to pull out stuff like that.
I have one potential theory for you.
Go ahead.
So we have Jane and the crew reacting aggressively to this cocaine situation, and they even make several terrorist comments I'll say. Do you know what the Iran hostage crisis was?
Oh yeah, that was big in the 80s.
Get this. You ready for this one? This is going to blow your mind.
Yep.
Do you know how long that lasted?
It was a little over 3 days.
It was 444 days.
Oh. I must be thinking of something different.
444. AKA, how many fours, Crypto?
3 4s. That's where the people are in the embassy and they're locked in there?
Well, I'll say this. You're more of the history buff, so you'll be able to speak. You'll speak to it longer. But the whole standoff between the United States and Iran, we called the Iran hostage crisis, and that lasted 444 days, 3 4s. I don't know if that's the reference that he was going for with all of these, but I think that's rather interesting.
All right, I like that. That's a good explanation. Because I don't think the number 4 has any biblical or religious or any spiritual connotation to it. So it could be something purely political, which would be really cool if he's pulling something in real life like that. I like that.
Yeah.
We really need to tweet him. We need to have him on the podcast.
He said he wouldn't give Jesus an hour of his time. I doubt he'd join our podcast.
When we hit 100,000 subscribers, we'll have Mr. Stephen King on.
One of the other points that I had was, I don't have a ton of talking points yet. I kind of want to keep going through this, but he keeps bringing up in the foreword how this was his Lord of the Rings. This was his journey. We saw in the previous one, the journey through the mountains. Lord of the Rings, very Hobbit-esque, if you will. In this one, we get a sense of urgency being instilled. We had the ring race, the Nazgul chasing in the Lord of the Rings, and one of the first things that they do is they form the Fellowship.
Okay, so this is for him forming his fellowship.
So you see him kind of grabbing Eddie. You have to wonder, is this his forming his fellowship, this book, basically?
Okay.
We'll see where that goes. We'll see how many Lord of the Rings references we can pull out there, because he's obviously very passionate about this being his Lord of the Rings journey, where he's got to go to the tower as opposed to Mordor to destroy the ring. He's got to go to the tower. So we'll see how similar those are, but you'll notice in the Gunslinger, it was kind of very Western, right? You had kind of like that deserty vibe. Then you went to the mountains, and now we're kind of at this beach and in 80s New York, I think it is, an airplane, right?
Yeah.
So we have him going through a lot of different sceneries the same way Tolkien would, which I think is interesting. And actually, another side note: do you know Eddie Dean? Do you know who that is?
So like James Dean?
Eddie Dean. He was a Western actor back in the day.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So going back to that Western vibe and such, I think it's kind of interesting that he picked that name as well. I don't have too much at this point in time, but it'll be interesting to kind of watch that to see like how much does he seed and grow that as opposed to making it his own and an homage to it, if you will.
We'll have to look at other stuff as we go through and see if we can pick up more with the names and if that carries through.
Yeah, wonder who's going to be Denethor. That's my question. It's going to be Crazy Mad King.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. So I think that from when he wrote Gunslinger to this book, and I know we're doing a lot of comparisons, but I think that's fair because there's the Gunslinger is very divisive and a hard sell to get people into this amazing series. Do you like how the writing style has changed? Because my last kind of talking point is that the first book is all Roland-centric, and it's basically from his point of view the entire time. And now, this book, you have Roland's point of view, and you have Eddie's point of view. You now have the stewardess's point of view. You have a lot of different people. The army lady, sorry.
Yeah.
And you see King writing style change for who his perspective he's using. The language is changing.
Yeah.
That bores all of you? You don't?
No. This was... So for the background, for those that haven't seen the Gunslinger videos, I have read the first 4 books. I've started the 5th, and I think that's when I fell off. So I haven't read the 5th completely. I haven't read 6th or 7th at all. So I have no idea how the series ends up or where it goes.
Wow.
I've read the Gunslinger probably 4 to 5 times now. So I think I had read it twice or maybe 3 times when we started the video. But while we were doing that video, I reread it and listened to the audiobook of it, so I'm probably at 4 or 5 for that. So the Gunslinger is by far the one I have the most experience with, which may slant it. But I also am my favorite part about literature breakdowns is symbolism. And the first one is so heavy with religious symbolism, which is like, I love it. Like, that's my jam. That was my wheelhouse, and I loved it. Do I think this is written more straightforward, more narrative, more action? Yes. Do I have a problem with that? No. But I like the Gunslinger style better. It's just who I am as a reader. I like that part better.
All right, that's fair. So this one is more popcorn action, and that one's more of a drama, and that's your personal preference.
I think both have literary merit. I wouldn't say this one doesn't have literary merit, or it's just popcorn escapism. Like, if you want to read this for escapism and like you don't want to know anything about, the deeper meaning or the author, okay, that's great. This is not the channel for you. I don't know why you've made it this far in the video at this point. if you're not into that sort of thing,
just subscribe and turn us off.
Yeah, I am into that sort of thing, and I think both books have that. I think there's the way it's brought out in Gunslinger appeals to me more.
I think that prediction, though, and maybe why you eventually fell off the Dark Tower series, is I think that's going to wane throughout the series. I really do.
Yeah.
I think it's going to become more mainstream because he's changing as a writer. He's changing as an author. His life is changing. He gets off drugs. He's getting older. Society's changing and I have more influences, especially if he's writing this further into the 80s and 90s. And something important that we haven't mentioned is the Stephen King universe. Mm-hmm. His other stories he writes start to affect each other.
We'll see how I do this round. The first time I read this through, it was escapism purely. This time, I've gone through a lot more literary training and understanding that. We'll see how it comes out this time. I promise you we'll still pull out some stuff. I don't think it's going to get popcorny or pointless. I think Stephen King is a literary fictionist, and it'll be interesting to pick out what he puts into this.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have Easter eggs for you, I think, throughout, but they may start becoming farther apart and fewer. But I will carry you like a monkey on my back. I will be the gunslinger to the tower, and you are Eddie Dean, because we will make it through book 7 this time, my friend. You are finishing this series with me. Dragging, kicking, and screaming, because you made me read the Bakemonogatari thing. You owe me.
That hurts.
I love you. Nothing but love.
I'm never going to live that one down. I didn't know. All right, guys. Thank you for making it this far. All 2 of you that made it this far in this video. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We will be breaking down this. We are going up through, I believe, the Lady... Is it the Lady of the Shadows?
I think so. I haven't flipped through because I don't have the book.
I think we're going through the Lady of the Shadows chapter next and then stopping for part 2 on our 5-part adventure. Thank you for checking us out. Peace out.
Peace.